Welcome to this training video on how to assign and/or delegate a staff member access to a group or an eForm. Also within this video, we're going to look at what access that gives the staff member, whether they've been assigned or delegated access to a group or an eForm. For today's session, I'm using my demo account with all demo data in it. If you have any questions at all, either during the video or after, you can contact our support team. On the top right-hand side of your account under Help and FAQs, this will take you to our knowledge base where there are hundreds of articles on how to complete certain actions, such as assigning or delegating staff to an eForm or a group. Whilst under Help, right down the bottom, clicking support, this will take you to all the ways that you can contact our support team. One of those ways is via live chat on the bottom right-hand side of every Operoo page. Clicking that icon, it will open up a chat screen and you can start a conversation with one of our support team. What I first wanted to look at is when logging into Operoo. If you're not aware, there are two interfaces. The first interface, which is the one that we're looking at now, is our administrator interface. So that's any staff members who have been allocated administrator access of Operoo. And then also, if I just toggle to here to my Operoo Central, MWalsh 001, this is my staff interface. So any of your staff members who have not been assigned access to be an administrator will only have Operoo Central. I'm going to be looking at both of those interfaces today, but I am going to start with my administrator interface. We're going to look at assigning and delegating access. So what's the difference between the two of them? Just a very high level. Assigning access, think of it as giving view read-only access, I should say. So when you assign an eForm or you assign a group to a staff member or a number of staff members, they can read information about that student. And I will show you what this looks like, but they can see information such as the student's emergency contact information, the eForm response, if it is an eForm that you're assigning access to, and also any medical and dietary information if you have opened up that section of Operoo. So the staff member, whilst on a trip, for example, can access the medical and dietary information for that student as well as the emergency contact information. So assigning access is a view only. With assigned access, you also have other functionalities, such as creating a roll call report or taking a roll call. Also viewing specific reports about that student, such as a dietary report. Also, if permission has been given, staff can communicate with parents and carers associated to that group or that eForm. And that could be sending an email, sending an SMS, or sending a push notification. So that's your assigned access. With your delegated access, you can only delegate eForms. You can't delegate groups. And when you do delegate an eForm, you're giving that staff member or those staff members full administrator access of that specific form. So again, I will show you what this looks like down the line. But what this means as a high level is that staff member can archive the form. They can respond on behalf of any of those administrator functions that a full administrator would have every form. Before I show you the difference and how to actually assign and delegate staff, the first thing I wanted to do is come into my settings, which is on the bottom left-hand side, which is that cog icon. Now, when I was talking about assigning access, I did mention permissions for staff members. If I scroll down to my staff permissions, this is the section here that I wanted to start with. By default, staff members will have access to send SMSs, send push notifications, and send emails. So if you do not want staff to have access to those functionalities when they've been assigned access to a group or an eForm, just remove those settings, and then staff will not have access to that. Same as roll calls. If I remove this now and then come down and click save, my staff members, if I come back into my settings and scroll down, my staff members won't have access to communicate to parents and carers. They won't have access to take roll calls as well. But for today's purposes, I'm going to put that back on so I can show you what that looks like. So just bear that in mind when looking at assigned access. If you do or do not want staff to have certain functionalities, jump into your settings, that cog icon on the bottom left-hand side, and make sure the right settings are selected. I'm just going to save that now. So let's go straight into assigning access. So assigning access is your read-only view of student profiles, as well as other functionalities such as communicating and taking roll calls. We're going to look at forms firstly. When you go to assign access to a form, there are two ways that you can do it. The first of which is a drag and drop. So if I click on my Australia trip October 2022 form, I've got 12 students who are associated to this form, and I've had no responses as yet. I've had a number of responses so far. If you are not familiar with creating eForms, have a look at our knowledge base, have a look at our training videos on our YouTube site. There's loads of good content in there that will help you out with those different aspects of Operoo. I'm not going to go into creating a form in this session. I've got that form created. But when we look at assigning access, so we were touching on drag and drop. So clicking my Australia trip to show my card view. Over on the right-hand side under staff assignments, it says you have no staff assigned to this eForm. So what that means is administrators only have the ability to see this form. No staff have been given access. For my drag and drop, all I simply need to do is find my staff member. In this instance, I'm using my demo staff, Juliet Smith. Clicking on Juliet's profile turns it green. All I then need to do is, with my mouse, click on my mouse and drag Juliet over to that form. You'll see there's now a green tick next to Juliet's name. Letting go of my mouse, it comes up with this message. Are you sure you are assigning Juliet Smith with her username to Australia trip October 2022? I want to do that, so I'm going to click proceed. Now you can see on the right-hand side, Juliet has been assigned access to that eForm. The other way that you can assign access is by opening the form. To open a form, you need to click on the 3 lines of that form. Once you've opened a form, on the left-hand side, there's a menu. Second option from the top is where we're looking at, assign delegate staff. Clicking that now, I can see that Juliet's already been assigned. I've previously assigned Juliet. If I would like to assign anybody else, just coming in, searching for that staff member or clicking their name and then clicking assign. So for the Australia trip, October 2022, I've assigned Juliet Smith via drag and drop, and I've assigned Emma Collins by clicking into the form, clicking assign delegate staff, finding Emma, clicking her name, and lastly, clicking assign. So that's how you would assign access to an eForm. When you're looking at groups, it's the same way. You have a drag and drop, or you can open that group. So I'm going to look at my life-threatening medical conditions and my anaphylactic allergies. Clicking on that to open up that view. On the right-hand side, I can see I have no staff assigned to this group. Finding Juliet and dragging Juliet over to that group of anaphylactic allergies and clicking proceed. So that's it. We can now see that Juliet has access to that anaphylactic allergies group. And if you're not familiar with creating groups, especially dynamic groups where you can identify your students with specific medical or dietary needs, there is a recording, a training video that goes into detail on how to create groups within Operoo. So have a look at that training video. The other way that I can assign access to my group is if I right click on it and click manage this group. On the left-hand side, I can assign staff. So clicking assign staff, Juliet's already been given access to it. I'm going to add John. So simply by clicking John, John's been added over here and clicking save. And if you have your notifications sent, an email will go out to the staff member letting them know that they have been assigned to that group. So that's assigning access into a group and an eForm. For both, you can drag and drop. So that's finding that staff member's profile and dragging them over to the form or the group, or you can open up the form or the group and assign access via the menu on the left-hand side. Before we look at delegating access, I wanted to show you what that actually looks like to the staff member. So to do this, I have to go over to my Operoo Central, which is my staff view. Clicking Operoo Central, that will then open up this view here. So remembering this is the view that all staff members will have. When I come down to my groups and eForms, I actually want to go into Juliet. So I'm going to go over to Juliet. Juliet is just a staff member. She's not an administrator. So coming down as Juliet, I've got my anaphylactic allergies group. So I can see that there's some students with a few medical conditions, and either clicking anaphylactic allergies or view 3 students, it takes you to the same place. I can then see, right, I've got Isabella, Laura, and Max all have anaphylactic allergies. If I hover on the icon, I can see that information. And if I open up the profile, by clicking on the student's name, it opens up that full profile for me. So I can see the contact information and I can see all that information here. So for example, for this test student, there's an egg allergy. So going up, staff will have access to all that information. Also at the top, these are the options that staff will have depending on the permissions that you have given them. So roll call report. This will allow staff to create a roll call report. This is particularly useful if you are taking students on a trip, for a fixture, or for after school club. So you can say which students are present and which students are not in attendance. Generate report. This will show you reports that you can generate, such as a dietary need report, or a medical conditions report, or a short summary report. Manage news articles. If the staff member has been given permission, they can create a news article. Now, if you're not familiar with news articles, there is a training video on news articles and emailing. Please check it out. There's also a knowledge base on news articles as well. So plenty of good information to help you create a news article. And then you have send messages. So this is your email, your SMS, and or your push notification, depending on what permission you have given your staff. So that's what it looks like when staff are looking at a group. I'm just going to go back into Juliet, just quickly jump into that eForm. So it was my Australia trip. Here we go. So for my Australia trip, I have 12 students. I have an extra icon down here because it's an eForm. It tells me as a staff member information about the student. So I've had no response from 9 students. No students have not accepted, and I've had 3 students who have accepted for that trip. So clicking on my view 12 students or the title of the form, that will take me to the same view that we were looking at for our groups. So I can see all of the students. I can see if they've responded or not. Clicking on their name will take me to that student profile. So I can see that medical and dietary information that might be really important for me to view whilst on a trip. I also have the options up top here. So my roll call report, I can view the eForm that it was sent. So that's the blank eForm that was sent originally. I can also generate reports. I can manage news articles, send eForms, but I can also export responses. So they're responses that the parent or carer has given to that specific form. And if I come down, looking at Charlotte, it says accepted. I can click on that and then it will show me what has been completed by the parent as well. So as the staff member, I have access to the response that the parent and carer has also provided for that specific trip. So that's your assigned access, whether that be to a group or an eForm. What I wanted to do now is I wanted to jump back into my administrator view and look at delegated access. So when you're looking at delegated access is giving the staff member full administrator access of that eForm. So as an administrator to all of Operu, you have the ability, depending on roles, to edit a form, archive a form, respond on behalf of, export responses and a few other functionalities within that. When you delegate access of a specific form, that specific staff member has that same level of access. When it comes to delegating, you can only delegate a form, as I mentioned right at the start. So to delegate a form, there is only one way of doing it. I'm going to use my Australia trip again as an example, clicking on the 3 lines to open that form. And it's the same place that we went to earlier, assign delegate staff. And I'm going to give Juliet access, a delegated access. So clicking Juliet and then clicking delegate. So right down the bottom now, I can see that Juliet has assigned and delegated access. And if you wanted to remove, you could simply select the option and then click remove selected permission. I've delegated Juliet access. So let's have a look and see what that looks like to Juliet. So logging into Juliet now. On the top right-hand side, under eForms, there is a drop-down. If I click that, I have my eForms, which are Juliet's eForms, and delegated forms. So clicking delegated forms, these are all of the forms that Juliet has been given delegated access to. And as an administrator, you'll notice this is fairly simple, similar, I should say, to the administrator form library. So finding that form, here's my Australian trip, October 2022. So Juliet straight away can see that it's a parent form and it's event form. The event is the 5th of October, and there's 3 submissions so far. As with an administrator of Opera, clicking on the title of the form then opens this up for Juliet. So again, this will be familiar. It is the same screen pretty much as an administrator has. So within this, Juliet can, if I look at Christopher, and Juliet can respond on their behalf. So that's completing the form response on behalf of a parent or a carer. Juliet can send an email reminder to the parent asking them to complete that form. Now, remembering when you build a form, you can build in automated reminders that go based on the schedule, but you may choose to also send in a manual reminder. This form has a payment against it, so Juliet can manage that payment. So if a cash payment was made, for example, or a bank transfer, Juliet can update that to reflect that the payment for the trip has been made. Juliet can also lock a response. So all of that information that an administrator would be able to do, Juliet then has access to do. Under your eForm actions, Juliet can edit the form. She can archive the form. Under the actions, your show hide columns, exporting all of those responses, and of course, adding your chart. So when it comes to delegated access, just bear in mind that you are giving that staff member full administrator access of that form, and just make sure if that's the right thing you wanted to do or whether assigned access is what you wanted to do. That's what I wanted to show you today. So as a summary, I just wanted to talk about the differences. So if you think of assigned access as a read-only view with a few additional functionalities based on permissions, such as communicating with parents. Now that could be via a news article, email, SMS, or push notification. Also viewing reports for that student, medical and dietary reports, and taking a roll call. With assigned access, you can assign an eForm or a group. Then you have delegated access, which is only applicable to eForms, and it gives that staff member full administrator access of that form that they've been delegated to. And if you are going to look at assigning access, just remember, jump into your settings, that cog icon on the bottom left-hand side, just to make sure you have given your staff the right level of access that you want to, that you'd like them to have. Thank you very much for your time today. If you do have any questions at all, please contact our support team. They'll be more than happy to help. Thank you very much.